The night the river came alive. I still remember the first time I read William Bartram's account of that night in Florida. I actually had to go back and read the same paragraph twice, because at first I thought I had misunderstood him. This man had just arrived at a river in the middle of the wilderness. He knew there were enormous alligators in the area. He had already seen one of them. And somehow, his decision was to stay there for the night. I remember thinking, "William, what exactly are you doing?" Maybe I'm too used to modern life. I have a phone in my pocket. I know where the nearest hospital is. If something goes wrong, I can call someone. If I don't like the campsite, I get in my car and leave. Bartram had none of that. And yet he looked at a Florida river in 1774 and apparently thought, "Yes, this seems like a reasonable place to sleep." That decision is what started one of the strangest nights I've ever read about. Bartram had been traveling through Florida, studying the landscape and wildlife. He wasn't looking for a fight. He wasn't some drunk cowboy trying to prove how tough he was. He was curious. And I actually understand that part. My own family has always been full of people who loved history. Growing up, I was surrounded by old books, photographs, stories about people who lived before us. So I understand the temptation. You see something unfamiliar, and your first instinct isn't always to run from it. Sometimes you want to get closer. You want to understand it. But there's a difference between curiosity and stupidity, and I think Bartram came dangerously close to that line. He had chosen a campsite on a bluff above the river. The place probably looked beautiful. Water below him, trees stretching in every direction. The kind of landscape that would make you stop and think, "This is why I came here." And then an enormous alligator appeared. Not some small animal hiding in the reeds. A monster. Bartram described it as being around 12 feet long. 12 feet. Every time I say that number, I have the same reaction. That's not an animal I'd casually walk past. That's a car with teeth. And this particular alligator wasn't interested in simply watching Bartram. It rushed toward him. Now, I've spent enough time around animals to know something that people sometimes forget. An animal doesn't have to be angry to be dangerous. It doesn't have to hate you. It doesn't even have to understand what you are. It just has to decide that you're in the wrong place. And Bartram was. He managed to get away, grabbed his gun, and shot the alligator. And you might think that would have been enough. One giant alligator charging your campsite? I'd take that as a very clear message from nature. I'd pack my things. Bartram didn't. This is where I honestly start questioning his judgment. He went back to his work. He had been cleaning fish. And while he was doing it, another alligator came rushing toward him. This one came close enough that its tail swept across the ground near him. Think about that for a second. You're standing beside a river. You've already killed one 12-foot alligator. And then another one comes for the fish in your hands. At what point do you say, "You know what? Maybe I'll eat somewhere else"? Apparently, Bartram didn't. And that's one of the things I find fascinating about people who lived on the frontier. Their definition of danger was completely different from ours. We think danger means something has gone wrong. For them, danger was simply part of the environment. A river could feed you. That same river could kill you. The forest could give you wood. The forest could hide someone who wanted you dead. The wilderness wasn't your friend. It wasn't your enemy either. It simply didn't care. And that evening, Bartram was about to learn just how little the river cared about him. The sun went down, and if you've ever spent a night somewhere genuinely dark, you know how different the world becomes. During the day, you can see things coming. At night, you hear them first. A branch breaks. You turn your head. Nothing. Then you hear water moving. You look toward the river. Nothing. And that's when your imagination starts doing the work for you. I hate that feeling. Because the human brain is terrible at dealing with things it can't see. Give me a bear in front of me and at least I know what I'm dealing with. Put something 10 feet away in complete darkness? Now I'm imagining 20 different possibilities. And Bartram was sitting beside a river where the darkness was hiding something much worse than my imagination. The alligators were gathering. More and more of them were entering the water. They were feeding on fish that had been pushed into the area. And suddenly, the quiet river wasn't quiet anymore. There was splashing, movement, animals crashing into one another, jaws snapping shut. Bartram watched this enormous gathering of alligators moving through the darkness. And I keep coming back to one question. What did that sound like? Because we've seen alligators on television, we've seen documentaries, we've watched them floating almost completely motionless in the water. But imagine hearing dozens of them in the darkness when you have nowhere else to go. You don't have a hotel room. You don't have a locked car. You're not watching through a television screen. You're sitting there, right beside them, and they know you're there. That last part is what gets me. Bartram wasn't observing nature from a safe distance. He was part of the scene. He was sitting inside their world. And I think that's something we've lost. Today, we experience dangerous animals through glass, behind fences, through cameras, through screens. We can pause the video. Bartram couldn't pause anything. If one of those animals decided to climb the bank, there wasn't much between him and it. And still he stayed. I don't think that makes him fearless. Actually, I think the opposite. I think he was afraid. But he was also curious enough to stay. And that's a much more interesting kind of courage. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's realizing that something can hurt you and deciding that you still want to understand it. Although, personally, I think there comes a point where courage becomes poor decision-making. And sleeping beside a river full of 12-foot alligators is probably somewhere around that point. What fascinates me most about Bartram's story isn't even the alligators. It's the way he looked at the wilderness. He didn't see a place that needed to be conquered. He observed it. He respected it. And sometimes, he seemed genuinely amazed by it. That's something I wish more people understood when they talk about the old American frontier. We romanticize it. We imagine the freedom, the horses, the rivers, the untouched forests. But we forget the other side. There was no safety net, no easy way home, no guarantee that the beautiful river beside your campsite wasn't filled with animals that had been living there for thousands of years. And that's what I imagine Bartram realized that night. He wasn't the important thing there. The river was. The animals were. The wilderness had existed long before he arrived, and it would continue existing long after he left. He was just a visitor. And maybe that's the real lesson hidden inside this strange little story. Sometimes we look at nature and think we're exploring it. But from nature's point of view, it's probably the other way around. The river was there. The alligators were there. And then one night, a curious man named William Bartram showed up and decided to sleep beside them. I'm not sure I'd have made the same decision. Actually, I know I wouldn't. But I'm glad he did. Because more than 2 centuries later, I can sit here, read his words, and imagine that night. The darkness, the water, the movement beneath the surface. And somewhere out there, an enormous alligator sliding silently through the river. And every time I think about it, I have the same thought. Beautiful place. Terrible campsite.